mercy that he kissed a guilty world. And isn't that so true? We are guilty, and yet he still loves us. And so I am thankful for that. Good job, y'all. I'm sure glad y'all are in our church, so thank you. Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. I'm not prepared to give thoughts now, but some of the conversations that I had this morning, for those of you who weren't here in different places, I went to the life of David and Absalom and preached a message on what is wrong that is keeping you from getting right, and looked at their relationship. I don't think I finished my thought either. I was giving you the timeline from the time that Amnon abused Tamar and then Absalom killed him. There was a 5-year separation between David and Absalom. And I don't know if I may have said that, I can't remember, but there was a 5-year separation between the two. And, conflict divides families. But, the other side, I did make reference to the fact that it takes two to make things right. So what do you do if you've done everything you can do, and yet that conflict is not resolved? And even I thought about that. We can sit and preach a message. You ought to get right with each other, and your pride is what keeps you from getting right, and peer pressure and power struggle and point of perspective. And but what if you've done everything you know how to do, and it's still not right? And so I may deal with that. That might be an interesting thing to actually study. Like I said, I would rather take the time and study that and maybe give some thoughts. I have some thoughts in my mind that I think could go along with that. And so, yeah, what do you do in that case? So anyway, I may deal with that in the near future. Matthew chapter 26, did I already give that to you? And so Matthew chapter 26 is where we will start. And as I expressed this morning about David and Absalom getting right with each other, and actually not getting right with each other, then how we speak to people makes a difference. How we speak to people makes a difference. And little kid statements, the sticks and stones and break my bones, but words will never harm me, is not true. You've heard me say that before. You've already concluded that also. Words can be very harmful. And so I want us to look at some things here tonight that I hope will be a help to us. So Matthew chapter 26, we will begin in verse 69. And before we do then, let's pray together. Now, dear Lord, I come to you tonight in just a little simple truth that we all already know, but it's good to be reminded of. So I pray that as we read these few verses and make the application, that it'll be a help to us. And we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Matthew chapter 26 and verse 69. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, Thou also was with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. Remember a few chapters before, Peter had told Jesus, I'll never deny you. Vehemently, he said, I'll never deny you. And that's when Jesus said, no, you will. Before the cock crows, you will have denied me. And so this is Peter's denial. And so it's happening here and now. So that's what we're reading about. And so this one damsel comes to him and says, I know you. Basically, you're one of them. In verse 70, but he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto them that were there, This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, Surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. And that is an interesting word. That word bewray or be to bewrayeth means to disclose or to make visible. You've been teaching in Sunday school class, Brother Jones, to manifest. And so Peter, they said to Peter, your speech bewrayeth you. It manifests you. And it reveals who you are. Verse 74, then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. Just as we talked about David this morning, I made reference to Peter and mentioned that there are two individuals, one in the Old Testament, one in the New, that we all can relate to. Peter's heart was broken because he did everything that Jesus knew that he would, told him that he would. And Peter was an emotional individual. And I want to use an illustration as for foundation of some thoughts that I want to give to you here tonight. All of us have gauges in our cars. And that instrument panel where the speedometer and everything is, there are little indicators on all of our gauges that will reveal to us the condition of the car. If your oil gets low, that little light will come on and tell you that your oil is low. And if you're low on antifreeze, whatever the case may be, then we deal with that check engine light, and so that'll bug you to death. So and I hated going to Advance or AutoZone, and they'll put it on and tell you what's wrong with your car, but they're not supposed to actually take it off. By law, they're not supposed to take it off. And so, but what they'll do, they'll plug it into your car, and then I always ask them, can you take that off for me? And they'll say, I'm not allowed to do that. And I said, oh, okay. And what can I do to get it off? And so a few years ago, I learned that they'll say, well, it's kind of like they look around to make sure. And they say, I can't do it, but if you want to look at this machine and hit that button right there, if you want to do it. And so I've said to him before, look, I know you can't do it, but if you hand me your little machine, I'll hit that button. I don't mind hitting that button. Well, I got embarrassed about being able to do that, and so I just got online and bought my own little machine that you can take that light off. I had to do it because I have remote start on my truck, and if it's a problem with your check engine light with your emission, then it won't start with the remote. And so I said, well, I got to have my remote start. So I just carry my little machine with me, and my check engine light comes on. I just check it in and hit the button on my own, and so I can start my truck with my remote start. And so those gauges are there to, I'm sorry, Brother Lehman, but that's what I do. I just, yeah. Jared over here shaking his head at me too, so some of the car guys. And so those gauges are there for our benefit. Because those gauges, and that's, by the way, that's why they're not supposed to take it off, because they could be liable if something happens to your car and they took that reminder off. They don't want the liability. So I completely understand their rule. And so, but those gauges are there to help you. And if you don't pay attention to those gauges, you can end up really doing a lot of damage to your vehicle by not paying attention to those gauges. And so I want to give you some thoughts tonight about the gauge in your life, the gauge in your life. And well, where in the world can I find the gauge in my life? It's right there. It's right there. It's the words that we speak. And so the very first thing that we see here out of Matthew chapter 26, and we read this story about Peter, is we see that our speech reveals who we are and what we are. Our speech reveals what we represent. You know, if we represent the Lord, people ought to be able to see that in our life and hear it in our voice. The things that we speak, we ought to be able to speak a good testimony and to speak good things for the cause of Christ. And so there were multiple people that says, we know who you are. You have been with Jesus. And I know you started using language that you shouldn't have used, but the truth is your speech bewrayeth you. Your speech reveals you. Your speech manifests you. And so I hope at all of your places that you go to where you're around other people, the neighborhood, the workplace, school, whatever the case may be, the family, that your speech reveals that you're walking with the Lord. And so our language and our speech reveals who and what we represent. Not only does our speech reveal what we represent, but wrong speaking is a sign of wrong thinking. Wrong speaking is a sign of wrong thinking. So if you speak wrong things, it's because you're thinking wrong things. And so if you speak wrong things, it's because you're thinking the wrong things. Proverbs 23 and verse 7, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so we need to be conscious of that gauge. So that mouth, if the things that we say with our mouth is an indication. It's that gauge that's flashing at us and saying to us, you know what, your speech, your language, the words you're saying, it's revealing who you are. And not only is it revealing who you are, sometimes you say, why in the world did I say that? Well, you said that because you thought that. And so the wrong speaking is a sign of wrong thinking. And so maybe that's why Paul told us in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, and you know, this is a good list to think about and to memorize. Whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. And so our, wrong kind of language, wrong kind of speaking is a sign of the wrong kind of thinking. That's why it's important to put the right things into our mind, to our eyes, and listen to the wrong kind of music with filthy language in it. And I remember when rap music first came out. I think I was a youth pastor when that happened, maybe a little bit after, being a youth pastor. And in the summer, I could not believe the words. People have their windows down, and the filthy language that was being used. I said, you mean people put that in a song? And if you listen to songs that's got a bunch of filthy language in it, before you know it, that filthy word's going to come out when you get angry about something. And it may not even have to be anything that's worth any value, as far as you might be playing a sport and maybe not hit your golf ball right, or maybe not shoot a basket right, or next thing you know, you've thrown out one of those ugly words you've been listening to in all of those songs. And where in the world did that come from? Well, I'm going to tell you where that came from. That came from what you're listening to. And then you get to thinking about it. You watch it on movies. Years ago we got one of those, I forget, I don't even know if they still have them, but we had one of those things that would knock all of the cuss words out. And we'd watch movies, and this protective thing, I forget what it was called now. Anybody remember what that was called? Guardian, yeah. And so we'd watch movies, and then we realized, oh yeah, we watch a good movie, and well, we had to quit saying we watch movies because some of those movies had cuss words in them. We didn't realize it, and the preacher watches movies with cussing in it. You know, it's like, yeah. So but you got to be careful. If you don't watch your movies with the Guardian, you know, again, I don't even know if they exist anymore, but you listen to that stuff all the time. Those of you some of y'all work around people that have terrible language. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic or set you up or anything with, you know, oh, I got you on that one. You got to be careful because you're a really good Christian, but if you're around it and you hear it, and now you've thought it, and kind of like Peter, you end up saying something. Now his is a little bit more aggressive, but I don't know. Ask yourself, have you thrown out a little wordy dirt, you know, from time to time? And it's like some of you, dirty word, okay, for those of you, some of you look at what did he just say? Preacher messed up again. I'm glad I'm here to see it, you know, to hear it. You know, that one was on purpose, believe it or not. And so you throw out that wrong language. That's because you hear it from the people you work next to. You didn't mean to say that. You didn't plan to say it, but you've been hearing it so much. And that's why it's good if you're around some people to say, look, man, I'm a church person. By the way, they ought to know you're a church person anyway. And so you got to think on the right things. And so our speech reveals who we are and who we represent. And then the wrong speaking is a sign of wrong thinking. Matthew says either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and its fruit corrupt. For the tree is known by its fruit, in Matthew 12 and verse 33. O generation of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. One reason why some marriages have difficulty in making it, relationships I talked about this morning, have difficulty making it, because if you get mad, you get angry at each other, and you're looking for that opportunity to be the winner, you know, to be the one that comes out being the victor, well, your thinking's wrong. And instead of thinking of ways you can love each other and be kind to each other and helpful to each other, if you're thinking, I got to think ahead of them, I got to hurt them before they hurt me. Well, I mean, if that's the way you're always thinking, then you're going to say mean things. You're going to say ugly things. But if you'll just calm down, think the right things. You used to think good about your husband or wife. So could you go back to the early days the way you used to think and love them a little bit more and give them, see things from their perspective maybe a little bit more, and not be so ugly in your thinking? Because if you get ugly in your thinking, you're going to ugly in your words eventually. And so you got to be careful with it. Luke 6 and verse 45, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. And so our speech reveals what we are. Wrong speaking or wrong language is a sign of wrong thinking. And then third of all and last of all, wrong speaking will lead to more ungodliness. The wrong kind of speech will lead to more ungodliness. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 16 says, but shun profane. The word profane means irreverent, polluted, not pure, or holy. So we should stay away from impure language. Stay away from polluted language. Stay away from irreverent language. But shun profane and vain babblings or empty talk. So shun profane and vain babblings, for they will increase unto more ungodliness. I've seen it, and I've seen it lived amongst people. Usually it'll be in a group of people and you're having good, sweet conversation, and then somebody will say, I know I shouldn't say this. That's one of my statements. And I know I shouldn't say this. And then everybody usually pipe in before I know I shouldn't say it, but you're going to. And it's like, yeah, okay. And so, but maybe you're in a group and somebody wants to tell a shady story, maybe something that shouldn't be spoken. But you say it. Well, that opens the door to the next person. Well, if they said that, I'll say this. That's how gossip gets to going too. Did you all hear? And well, I'd heard, but I hadn't said anything to anybody. What'd you hear? And well, the next thing you know, for 30 minutes, you're all talking about what you heard and fill in the blanks with your own assumptions sometimes, and then it gets ugly. Because wrong thinking, wrong speaking, and it increases unto more ungodliness. And our flesh works with us in crazy ways. And I remember as a kid, I shouldn't have confessed this one. I've lived some of these things. I remember as a kid, you sneak out and you want to do some of these things that are funny. Do you remember your first cuss word? I mean, I came from a cussing family. And I remember being a kid, you just think it was the funniest thing to cuss. And you get around a bunch of boys, as soon as one boy says a cuss word, the next boy will say a cuss word, and the next thing you're having a contest to see how many cuss words you can string out together without repeating one. And I mean, we would do silly stuff like that. And now I haven't done that in a few years. Yeah. I haven't done that in many, many, many years. We're talking grade school now, okay? So don't be starting rumors about me. Between being in gossip sessions through the years, preachers can gossip too. And being in gossip sessions through the years, reliving, those little kid days. And before you know it, one person will say something that shouldn't be said, and then it increases unto more ungodliness. And so, James talks about the ships and the tongue, how that it can, this fire and the bridle and all of those kind of things. And so God says in James 3 and verse 10, out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. And so James is saying, look, blessing and cursing shouldn't be coming out of the same mouth. And it should be consistent. And so I want us just to be reminded, it goes along with this morning's message, pay attention to the gauge in your life. And the gauge is our words, because the words we use reveal what we are, and it reveals what we've been thinking. If you aren't careful, if you let your words get away from you, it'll just increase unto more ungodliness. And then you got this vicious cycle. The more words you say, you get more comfortable with it. I just thought of this. I had guys, and I got saved, and I quit all that stuff, the running around, the carrying on. And when I first got saved, there were some boys in the church that thought it was funny to cuss. And we're talking, oh my God, oh, very careful. I almost said too much, because they're all still in church and serving the Lord. But I was running around guys that were church kids. I was a bus kid, and I'm hanging around church kids that mom and daddies had positions. And those guys got to where they cussed all the time. And I kept telling them, you guys need to quit cussing. And I wouldn't cuss. I just got saved from all of that. I didn't need to cuss. But they've been raised in a church home. I don't know if they just starting to come out and increase to more ungodliness, or if it was a new thing that they just thought was cute, I guess. And we were in the living room of my mom and dad's house. And we were all there together. And one of those guys was talking about a business he was starting, and And he said, yeah, I'm going to name it such and blank, and said a cuss word. And we're all like, my word, he just said a cuss word in front of my mom and dad. And he cussed so much, he didn't even realize he cussed. And I mean, he's in front of my mom and dad, cussing. And so later on, we get with him and say, do you understand? You cussed in front of my mom and dad. Do you realize you cussed in front of my mom and dad? I didn't cuss. No, you did. You cussed. And it has become, you're cussing so much you're not even realizing that you're cussing now because it's just become a part of your life. And so he forgot to pay attention to that gauge that was flashing, you're a cusser. Okay, you're a cusser. So you got to be careful. Be careful what you say, and it reveals what we are. Wrong thinking will end up leading to wrong speaking, and that wrong speaking will increase unto more ungodliness. So look at the gauge in your life. Pay attention to the gauge in your life. Are you mean with your words? Are you hard with your words? Do you like hurting people with your words? And if you do, that gauge is probably flashing at you. You need to do some repairs. If not, it's going to create some damage that you might not be able to repair. And so look at the gauge in your life. All right, let's have a word of prayer.